Hello, and welcome to the Shine More podcast, where we are shining a light on all things special education with a passion to help those with special needs and a mission to empower individuals with various abilities. Today's guest is Mrs. Lee Townley, who is a special educator. She has been doing this for about 25 years now. She has a wealth of knowledge as she's been working in various fields with various populations. I'm going to let her get into that.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me in today, Kia. I love what I do. I've been 25 years is a long time. I come from a couple different environments. I've been in schools as a teacher, as an ESE teacher. I've worked as an autism coach, supporting administration and teachers and students as well. I have done a lot of work in the community with adults with intellectual disabilities. We do work with the group home down in Miami. Created their day program for their adults there. So when I was in college, I was part of a community program to help a young lady with an intellectual disability to own her own home, and she did. So we accomplished that. Family influences for people with different disabilities. So my family, my own daughter was a graduate of the school system, and she was part of the ESE continuum of services. So a lot of different influences there, but I love learning. So anything I learn with what I do, I bring back to apply for my students and to help parents. So I'm very happy to talk about anything. So
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And the whole purpose of the podcast is to empower parents, empower a person who may have special needs or various abilities. So I just wanted to make sure we can share information, that knowledge, just to kind of get them to be more aware of something that maybe they did not know.
Yes,
so
awesome.
Since you have the experience as an ESE teacher, as well as an autism coach, I thought it would be great to have you speak about the IEP process, individualized education plan, as well as the mode of communication. I think that that's something that is so important when we talk about how individuals with a cognitive disability who may not, they may not be able to verbalize what's going on with them or ask that question, but there is a way that they do communicate.
Right.
So I would like for us to talk about that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's a big thing. So yeah.
Yes. So let's go into first the IEP. So we know that the IEP process, it is something that we must, use in the field of ESE, right? Once a student is made eligible, now we're generating what's called an IEP, or an individualized education plan. There are various components of that plan. As an ESE teacher, first starting off with the present level of performance. And I know some areas may call it something different, but typically that's what I've seen, the present level of performance. How do you ensure that this section paints a clear picture of the student?
For me, it starts before the school year even starts. The first thing that I do is I take a look at the IEP before the child even comes in. I take that information, I plan what I'm going to do first day. If I don't know what to do and what their IEP says, their previous IEP, I'm just shooting blind. And that's not something that's going to work for them. It's not going to work for me. We want the first day to be successful. So that would be the first place that I start. The second thing is the first day itself, doing observations, looking to see how the child interacts with me, with their peers, with paras. And really, this is where the parent input starts. I am a huge fan of collaboration with parents. It makes the students here successful if I establish that from the beginning. And they have a wealth of knowledge about their child that I need to know. And I don't need to know everything, but what they tell me on how they communicate, how they learn best at home, the things they like to do, I can take those pieces and integrate that in to what I'm doing in the classroom to help them be successful. So it's building up to, what information that I have, and we'll put it all together. Then you have the first couple of weeks, we always assess how are they doing with their skills, their reading skills, writing skills, math skills, social skills. We do those observations, the assessments, the Brigance, the DAR. Those are the technical pieces. but they're just as important in the PLP as just an observation on a random day in a classroom, because they
Right.
do really give you an idea of where the kid is, where they need to go, and what skills might be missing. So we would always look at that. And then from there, we have data that we collect during the year. We have the results from the summative assessments that we do for the FAA, or if you have a student in a more inclusive setting, from the FAST, which is the new, I think they used to call it the FAA. You would have that information as well. Observations, anecdotal records, input from the related services, the nurses, occupational physical therapists, speech therapists. And I say all that, even the behavior specialist, I almost forgot that. I looked down and I saw it. That's a huge piece too. All of that information needs to be reflected in that PLP. It's not just a statement of, well, I've seen the kid add once, I've seen the kid write the word dog once. Those really don't give you a good overall image of what this child can do. And those pieces all combined together are what really gives you that good data, that good information to write a PLP that's reflective of what this kid can do. And again, as a teacher who may get my student next year, that's why I need to make sure that it's all there, so that when they're getting that student, they know this is what they were doing, this is where they struggled, and they can take that and make their year successful. So I would, start from pre-planning and go all the way through to when we write it, and use all of that data to combine in there.
Right, great. And something that came to my mind as you were talking, because in the very beginning you mentioned the parent, and it is so important to get that parent input. But then also we want to be sure that when we're documenting in the IEP, that we are reflecting the student in the classroom setting. Because I know sometimes I've heard parents say, well, he doesn't do that at home, or he does this at home. And we know that it's not always, but a lot of times their behaviors may be different. Students' behaviors may be different at home than it is at school. So it's always, I think it's very good to also, like you said, have those other components that you mentioned, the assessments and all of that, because that is so important to have, but that parent input is important as well.
Yeah, and like you said, because they do different things in different, settings. Again, it also shows, are they taking what we're teaching in school and applying it at home, or what they're learning at home, or they bring it to the classroom? How do those two how do they show those generalizations for what they're able to do? And as an ESE parent, I want people to see my kid as a whole, and what everything she can do, from her, from her struggles, which is what they're going to see first, to what her successes are and her, her accomplishments are. So that's why, it's nice that parent input is accepted. There's a whole point in the IEP where we ask parents for input. I would always tell any parent, fill it out, because that's your opportunity to say, this is what works, this is what doesn't, and it needs to be included in that IEP to give that whole image of what the kid, who the kid actually is, or who the student is.
Right. And so we know that that PLP section is a direct link to the goals and objectives.
Yes.
So how do you determine what's going to be that goal for that student once you're streamlining it from the PLP section to now you're ready to create a goal?
PLP to me is almost like a funnel. I put the successes at the top and what their strengths are, what they can do. From there, it becomes, this is where they struggle, where their weaknesses may be. Underneath that is, how does their disability affect it? If you're looking at creating an IEP goal, it also has to be something you can justify for what they need, what their needs are, but it also has to be something that can help build their skills to a greater level in the future. So, when you're doing it, you look at everything that's in the strength section and the weakness section, how it affects it, and what that data shows, what the growth was. If they have a goal and there was a particular part they struggled on, you're not just going to overlook that. You need to maybe build upon that, but expand upon the goal. Just because someone did not master a goal, it doesn't mean they didn't make progress. And so, that kind of thing, what's the purpose of the goal too? And when I'm looking at elementary or even middle school, it's those skills that build upon pre-readiness, readiness to more rigorous tasks. You have to see how they're going to support that independence in the future. And then when you get into the older grades, where you're looking at transition, you may be looking at how those goals are going to affect post-secondary outcomes, whether they're going to college, whether they're going to have a job in the community, they're going to day programs. So those goals need to not only be justifiable with data saying they were here, going here, but they also need to be relevant to where the child is also moving towards and what track they're on. So I should have mentioned my experience is more working with children with moderate to severe disabilities. So when I talk about something, it may be focused on that end of things. But even with students who have a learning disability or who may just have autism but don't have that intellectual disability component with it, you still want the IEP to be able to guide them into the direction of where they're going. And for me, they need to build upon what they have, but also tie into where they're going. And that's how I would create things. If we're talking about academics anyway, that's what I would look at. Always, for me, there should always be an ELA goal, always be a math goal, always be a writing goal. Because those are the three pieces of academics that you're really gonna focus on. Exactly, exactly. Now, if you're looking at a student who's older, who may be focusing on a day program or just a community program, your transition goals should reflect, or your academic goals should reflect on building them towards an independent ability or independent skill set in that area. So you may not be focusing on academics anymore, but you're still building them towards independence in something, math, money counting, something that ties into what their post-secondary goal is.
Right.
And when I look at the other parts of the IEP too, social and emotional, again, ties into where they are, where would you like to see them go? If you have a student who is an introverted person, it's okay to be an introvert. Introverts do great things. I mean, but you want to be able to build their skills up to where when they get older, they'll be able to communicate in a job setting, in a college setting, whatever their goal is, you need to have those pieces in there. So the goals should really reflect that kind of direction as well and should be tied into that. Again, including strengths and weaknesses, but justifying, okay, student wants to go to college. If they want to go to college, then they need to be able to interact with professors. They need to be able to find where to get help when they need it, and different kinds of supports. So that might be a goal for a student who is more college bound than maybe somebody who is on the lower end of the spectrum of services. Independent functioning. When they're younger, what can they do in class? Cutting, gluing. Gluing is my favorite because I love it when, the kid puts, my students, there's 5 pounds of glue on a paper and that's why the paper weighs 10 pounds. But again, that's a skill. They know the glue goes there, but having the right skills to be able to use it. Cutting, writing, using a computer, logging into your computer. And when they're older, those transition skills will look a little bit different because they're more independent living skills, community skills, different things that will help to make them as functionally independent as possible. And I'm not saying that every student's going to be independent, but every student has the ability to be independent in some way.
At their level.
Yes, yeah. Even our students who are working on identifying letters, identifying numbers, identifying, and we're thinking they're never going to be able to do it. They will. There's something that they're going to be able to do independently. We have to be able to help build them up to that because that autonomy that they'll gain from that, we may not think it's a big deal, but it is. And it gives them that sense of, I did it. And that's a great thing for me to see. So, and the independent functioning piece too, when you're writing the PLP and you're writing goals, any kind of assistive technology that they're using, slant boards, if they have visual impairment and they need some kind of device to help to magnify what they're looking at, helping them to build those skills in that piece to be able to allow them to really gain that independence later. If they can learn to use it now and we work on that for 6 months to a year, when they're older, that's going to allow them access to a whole bunch of different things that we may not even realize at this point. But when writing goals and thinking about that, I'm looking at those pieces, like I said, building and even communication too. And that's another whole thing, but building them up to where they can get to that greatest level of independence that they can be at, and knowing that it's going to build from elementary to middle school to high school and then into the transition ages as well. So.
Right. Right. Okay. So what you mentioned earlier about data collection,
Mhm.
progress monitoring, what are your best practices for data collection, progress monitoring to ensure that as you're preparing for that, the progress reports, the
Mhm.
quarterly progress reports to show how the student is, how they're working towards those IEP goals? What is your routine as an ESE teacher to ensure that it is as it's done with fidelity, that it is actually
Yeah.
it is the true reflection of how the student is doing with these goals?
I'm I'm a big fan of observation, because if you're
Okay.
not paying attention and you're not looking, and again, that's just one piece of it, but you have to be able to know what they did.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I learned very early on is that, the student had a good day. How did they have a good day?
Mm-hmm.
Being as descriptive as possible, identifying the student was able to tie their shoes independently today. They had their favorite friend sit with them at lunch, and that's what made it a good day. Being able to identify those key details about it, that's another piece I think that when you're taking data, you really need to write down through
Mm-hmm.
anecdotal records, what specifically did they do?
Mm-hmm.
Did they do something with a verbal prompt, a gestural prompt? Did they do it independently? Making those notes and making sure that that's included, because 6 months from now, when you're looking at the data, you'll see a plus or a minus,
Mm-hmm.
but it's key to understand why
Right.
they or how they
Right.
got to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing that I would say, if you're observing and you're making those notes, that's going to help to support the data that you're taking every day,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that something is measurable and it's observable. When you're talking about behavior specifically, the student, not to identify anything, it's, in a negative way, but the student hit with an open fist instead of the student hit me. Well, how?
Mm-hmm.
What did they do? What did you see? And really, it takes that emotion out of it, so that you're really able to pinpoint this is specifically what happened. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with academics. When we give students in gen ed an assessment, we give them a spelling test. They got 7 out of 10 words. We know that's 70. We're able to
Mm-hmm.
identify that because they didn't spell 3 of the 10 words correctly. When we're taking data, we have to make sure that we're documenting as precisely as possible, so that we know, are they
Right.
going from manual hand over hand assistance to a gestural prompt to a verbal prompt, and building up to that independent level? And are they really meeting the expectations and the objectives of the goal? So, when I'm writing IEPs, my objectives build up to where they start out small with more supports, and then they become more independent as they go. And this way, we're always working on the goal, but I'm able to say, okay, they were able to do it here with manual supports, but they got up to where they can do it 80% of the time. They're tolerating that. We can bump up to the next step. And then we master
Mm-hmm.
that and we bump up to the next step. But it's clearly observable and measurable for me to say, they met it, we can move on. They met it, we
Mm-hmm.
can move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that sometimes when teachers are writing, like I'll get an IEP from another area, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not as measurable and really observable as I would like for it to be, because it doesn't specifically say what kind of prompting, what's the mastery percentage. So, for me, it's kind of a disservice. So
Mm-hmm.
when I'm writing it, that should be very clear. And I make sure that it's very clear,
Right.
that it's always in there. Am I taking data weekly? Taking data monthly? Am I
Yes.
taking data daily?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, some of our students with more significant disabilities need that daily data piece. So, so I make sure that the data is reflective of that. And
Mm-hmm.
that helps to give me a better picture. I always do portfolios. I know it's an old, I guess old school kind of way to do it, but we keep, my students pick their work. They put it into a portfolio. All of their
Mm-hmm.
assessment results go there. All of their relevant information goes in there. And when I go to an IEP meeting, if a parent says, "Well, what are they able to do?"
Mm-hmm.
Is I can
You can
show them
pull it
the
out and
binder.
show.
Yep, and it's
Exactly.
it's right
Right.
there. And I will say, one of the reasons that I take the time to establish a relationship with a parent is because when they have a question, they just know to come and ask me. So by
Mm-hmm.
the time we get to an IEP meeting, they know what I'm going to tell them
Right. They're already prepared. Yes.
they're already there. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps not only for trust and for them to know that they can come and say, well, I'd like to work on this. Okay, we can definitely add that in. And
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what we do. but at the same time, they're not questioning, oh, is he really doing the work? I had a parent this year, her son came to our classroom, and he's done incredibly well. Her biggest concern was behavior. And the one day I met her in the car, and she said to me, are you guys really taking behavior data with fidelity the way you're supposed to be taking it? And I looked at her and I was like, I was like, we're not making this up. He's doing very well. He's participating. About a week later, she came in to see her son at a Special Olympics event, and he read the oath, and he was playing with his friends on the team. And then she knew what we were telling her was actually the truth. But we send that data home with her every day so she can see it, because that was her thing. How is his behavior progressing? Is he doing well? And then she's visually able to see, okay, he's succeeding. So, but we established a lot of that through parent communication, sending notes home, giving her that data. So there wasn't this, well, there was a surprise at how well, but she didn't have any real questions at the time, of, is he, except for, are you really taking it right? And I look back on it now, and it was a compliment, but I understand why she questioned it, because she did have previous times where she was not getting all of that.
Right.
But the data, again, clearly said what he was doing. She was able to look at it and say, okay, he's doing this, and this. And now, when we send her information, she just sends us back, thumbs up, smiley face, because she knows that, he's making that progress that she's looking for. So, for us, again, data has to be clear. We take it every day. There are some things that I've seen with digital documentation. So everybody's collaboratively able to look at an online document. And we do have some students at the school that I'm at now. They do have that digital portfolio where they put the work and they upload it in. So everybody's able to look at how they're doing. Again, it's a trial thing, but
including the parent can see it also, or just awesome.
I believe so, yes. Because when they come into IEP meetings, they're able to show the parent, the advocate, whoever's there, this is what we have, this is what we do, these are the results that we have, and we're able to, excuse me, sorry, I disappeared. We're able to really, take a look at what they can do, and it's all right there. So, and it can be shared, however it needs to be. It's not sent out, I think, to outside, like businesses or agencies, but just something that has a collection of, this is what the student's able to do. And for me, I think that works. It's a great direction. You know how thick those binders can get. They're like, the Guggenheim Bible, and you're like, you get a backache carrying them down the hallway, but that digital piece, I think would really, be a good thing for schools to look at in the future. And then really, I'm a big fan of checklists too. Teachers Pay Teachers has a great one, not to give them a shout out on, here, but, they have a lot of great ones. A lot of, organizations, the, Autism Society, United Cerebral Palsy, they have some great checklists as well. Colleges are even coming out with some that you can download and use within your classroom. And that's a great, quick and dirty snapshot of, can they do it? Yes. Can they do it? No. And that helps to, show a collective picture as well.
Okay. And, as I'm listening to you, it's also making me think about the ESE teacher, right? Because in the beginning, we said we want the parents to be empowered. I also hear this conversation, and I hope that there are some ESE teachers that can take from this as well, because it is so important to take the data frequently. Take it, I always say, at least at minimum once a week, right? At minimum. And it also depends on the goal. But if you do that, like you said, you had that parent who asked you, is this really going on? Are you all really taking this data like this? And she was able to see for herself. But she was also receiving those home notes. That is so important. She was receiving the information, and your home notes was reflective of what's really happening in the classroom. So it was not a surprise at that IEP meeting, oh, he's doing this or she's doing that, because you've already, as the ESE teacher, kept that parent informed, you know, and also think, sometimes it's just during those conferences where a teacher may inform, but I know there are some teachers who have different, like Class Dojo or whatever different
Yeah.
where they keep an ongoing record, if you will, or ongoing documentation with the parent.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
by text or whatever.
Yeah.
But just keep the family informed,
Yeah.
because I think it just helps you so much more when you get to that IEP meeting.
Yeah. It does.
It builds that trust, you
Mhm.
know. So they're
Yep.
able to think, and they're able to know that, okay, this person, this teacher who has my child, especially if we're
Mhm.
talking about a child who is nonverbal. I
Nonverbal.
mean,
Yeah.
come on, let's think about it. Your child,
Physically disabled.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want to know what's going on, but you want to make sure your child is safe. You want to make
Yeah.
sure your child is able to, um, what they're telling you is not just, they're just not just kind of brushing you along, that they're
Right.
actually implementing it. So
Yeah.
I think that part, what you just said, is so, so important. Build that communication
Yeah.
and help those parents
Yep.
kind of feel at ease,
Yeah.
and know that you are doing your part, as
I find I find as a parent personally, it can be very lonely. You're looking when you send your child to school, you want for them to for me, and I want my child to learn, don't get me wrong, but the nature of my child's disability, I wanted her to also be comfortable and functional, and I want her to enjoy her life. And really, there was a time where I didn't feel that she got that because of the nature of her disability, of the situation that was going on at the school. So that's what I'm looking for. And I want my parents to feel the same way. If you when you establish that communication, again, class remind, class dojo, however that I text my parents. I'm very transparent. They can text me at 10 at night, call me at 4 in the morning. I don't care, because if they have a question, I want them to know to be able to answer it. But that's just me. That doesn't work for every teacher.
right.
But if you have that opportunity for parents to ask those questions, and you're diligently and with fidelity sending them that information, letting them know how your child's doing, you're creating an environment where not only is the child learning and the child feels safe, but the parent is going to know that you have their best interests for their child at heart. And sometimes, that's what a parent's looking for. I mean, I know I've met a couple of parents in my day who the expectations versus where the child was functionally, there was a difference.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's another piece for another conversation for another day. But, progress is still progress. And, showing that you're working with the child, they're making progress. This is what they're doing. You want that piece for them. And for me, that's always been an important part of what I do when I'm working with kids and with parents in the classroom. So,
Right.
it's, again, I've always had success. I've always had success. But it's an important part for me, because I would want the same thing for my child. And we had, even with bumps, we still had issues where things happened,
Mhm.
but we knew that they were ultimately looking out for what was best for her. So
Right.
we were fortunate in that. But I know how that can be a frustrating piece sometimes. Parents, they don't, something happened and they don't feel comfortable. They lose confidence, they lose faith, whatever it is, it's hard to get that back.
Mhm.
So anything you can do to keep it and maintain it,
Yeah.
that's what we should be focusing on.
Right,
So,
right. And put yourself as best you can in that parent's shoes.
yeah,
I think when you start there, you kind of look at things differently, and you may react differently or respond
yeah,
differently, you know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And that's again, your IEP will reflect, in my opinion, the work and the efforts that you've made with that child all year. If a parent comes in and they see a PLP that doesn't really show anything, they're gonna know you really didn't, well, they're gonna feel maybe
Or
that you
or
didn't put
or
the
a
effort
PLP that may look very similar to the one from last year. Yeah, yeah,
in.
yeah. You know.
What? What?
Right,
Yeah, that's yeah, don't do that. Anybody listening, please, and again, that's why I always start over. I have a
Mhm,
very specific way that I do it. It's that funnel piece.
mhm,
All the strengths go here, the weaknesses go here, but they're not going to be the same. Even from the end of May or June to
mhm.
the beginning of August, something may change.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's important to really review all of that,
Mhm.
and make sure that you're really pinpointing the true skills of what the student can do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we spoke about, different areas of that IEP. I want to go into the modes of communication. So we spoke about the different types of individuals that you have serviced, mainly moderate to severe cognitive disabilities, maybe individuals with intellectual disabilities or autism, things of that nature. So when it comes to those students or those individuals, how do you look at how do you determine what is the mode of communication, and why would you say that that is a vital piece to know?
When we meet anybody, generally there is some kind of communication involved. Hey, how you doing? Hey, what's going on? And it starts that way. Building friendships, it starts that way. Relationships, they start that way. When kids come into our room, if they can't communicate in some way with us, we have no idea what they know. We have no idea what they're learning. We have no idea if we are annoying them. We have no idea if they're really enjoying what they're doing. So we have to make sure, especially with our students who are on the nonverbal side or who have very, very limited communication, that we are looking for what their true mode of communication is. And even kids in gen ed, they have different learning styles. They have different ways of communicating with us that than their classmate next to them. Some are talkers and they just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and that's how they are best assessed. Some are quieter, they write, and they're able to communicate. I'm a better writer than I am a speaker because I do stutter sometimes. So when I'm writing, just going. But when I'm talking, sometimes I get nervous and that comes in. For my nonverbal kids or anybody that I meet who's nonverbal, there are always pieces in what they're doing that are going to be able to tell me this is what they're thinking, this is what I'm looking for, even without visuals. We watch that nonverbal communication, that body language, how they're interacting with us, how they respond to someone being close, being far away. Those are pieces that I would always look for with those particular students before I even bring out the communication devices, before I bring out visuals. If it's just a 2-minute observation, I can tell a lot by that. With kids who are more verbal, sometimes there's behavior in what they're saying. So we listen for the behavior cues and we're able to, say, okay, we can see them escalating up. We've got to put in the behavior supports. With our nonverbal students, that nonverbal communication may lead to behavior as well. So for me, the first thing I'm going to look for, if they're brand new to a school, what does the IEP say? What does the parent say? How do they communicate? School may not have heard one thing. The parent may hear a whole bunch of different things. Where's the middle ground? So sometimes it does take a while to get there, but it's always making an effort to find it. For my students who are who have been in the school for a while, who are coming to my class new, but who have established modes of communication, that's important to know as well. Their teacher may have had great success the year before with using a specific kind of picture with them. When we talk about picture communication and visuals, there's the real world pictures, there's objects before that. Some students need hands-on concrete objects to touch. Some need to have, if you're looking at a fire truck, it's got to be a picture of a real fire truck and to understand what that is. If it's an abstract picture, it's a drawing. So we have to know where all of that fits into what they can do. That a lot of that's done through the observation, through speech and language assessments, and just engaging with them. We do a lot in my class the first couple of weeks to get to know what the kids' interests are, what they like, how they interact with everything. And I'll play a lot of games those first 2 weeks because I want to know, okay, basic things. If I have a fun contest with you and we're fun and it's moving and it's fast, what can you do during this time? What are you going to not respond to what I have here? But then when I bring this out, you're interacting with that. That gives me an idea of, okay, where are they communicating? What supports do they need? And where to go from there. If I have a student who's nonverbal and I put 10 pictures down on a table and that's too much, I'm not going to get an appropriate response from them. So I have to know, okay, we're going to scale it back. So it takes time to establish it. But again, looking at, writing being one mode of communication, being verbal is another, and being, nonverbal, but using just gestures and sounds and, even those basic objects or pictures, that's going to give me an idea of how they communicate. Once I know how they communicate, I know I can ask them if they understand something. I can ask them to make choices. I can ask them if they're feeling frustrated and show me how you feel and give them a choice and they can tell me. It's not something that's going to happen the first day. And that's where I think a lot of people get frustrated. They're like, oh, I tried to use it. No, kids don't learn how to talk in one day either. If you think back to, little kids, they learn through exploring and listening and hearing, and, their speech isn't developed until they're 4 or 5 years old. I mean, completely, where they're, speaking in full sentences, pronouncing words correctly. And that's 5 years. And if you have an individual who has an intellectual disability or a delay, it's going to take more time for them to be able to learn it. So we have to give them time to show us this is what I can do, without it just being, oh my gosh, I tried it once, it didn't work.
Right.
I've gotten that a lot, and I've heard that from people a lot. And I'm like, so you tried it once? And they said, yeah. I was like, then you didn't try it enough. I had somebody tell me one time, I was giving a young man a choice between sandwich meat for lunch. And she comes up and she goes, can't tell you what he wants. And I said, well, if I never ask him, he'll never tell me.
Right.
But he was able to touch the one that he wanted, and that's how I knew that he wanted this particular kind of thing. And it takes time for him to learn the difference between, one and the other, but we got to that point. And, again, that comes through instruction, through therapy, all those different things. But it's so important to identify what it is, because you can stand up there 6 different ways till Sunday. You can have an amazing lesson, but if you really don't know if they're learning, it's all, to me, a moot point, because that's the point of us being there. We have to know that they're getting what we're teaching. And with the content becoming even more rigorous than it has been, over the past 20 years, I mean, a lot's changed with the academic expectations. You have to really know, do you really understand what I'm saying? And if you do, tell me, show me, through, body language, gestures, visuals, words, whatever that is, tell me that. And to me, communication is behavior.
Right.
If I'm standing there and I'm wiggling my chair, I probably got to go to the bathroom, or I got to get up, I got to move. No one said a word. So, as teachers, when we look for those things, and even parents will tell you in those surveys, well, if my child starts singing this song out loud, this may mean this. That's a form of communication, that, is important to know, because then we're able to translate that and generalize it into the classroom. But it's a huge piece. And to me, it's very, very important for teachers to establish what that is, especially as part of that first 2 weeks of, of the year, where you're assessing, where you're doing things. Identifying that mode of communication is just as important as any other piece that you're doing. So.
Right. Well, I those were all of the questions I had for you. Is there anything else you would like to share in regards to the IEP process or modes of communication, or anything else that you can think of? As the fabulous ESE teacher that you are, is there anything else you can share?
As a teacher, no.
Okay.
But I will say to other teachers that ESE has changed a lot since I was where a first year teacher is now. We used to differentiate between disabilities. You get your degree in at the time it was mental retardation or learning disabilities. You don't do that anymore. So that's changed. Your experiences have changed. So many things have changed with ESE that you have to be willing to really roll with what's going. And there's tons of stuff out there, a lot more than I would say was available when I was, a wee teacher back 25 years ago. Boy, I feel old. But as far as being a teacher, it's a great job to do. Just don't. It's going to be frustrating, but just just remember, it's about the kids.
Right.
My only thing that I would say to parents: parenting is a full-time job. When you have a child with a disability, it can be overwhelming. Always remember in this process that you have a voice. Your input is important.
Right.
What you think is important. If you ever feel that it's not, remember that it is. And, you know, with all of the political stuff that goes on and the changes to the curriculum that goes on and everything that goes on, nobody knows your child better than you do.
Right.
So, you know, work with your teacher, talk with your teacher, your child's teacher, sorry. You know, if something doesn't feel right, continue to advocate for that. You know, I've seen a lot of parents come in with advocates and the advocate is doing all the talking.
Yeah.
It should be supporting the parents to be able to find their voice. And it's a hard thing to do. You know, my husband and I are very fortunate because we work in this field. When it came to issues that we had with our daughter, we knew what to do because that's the nature of our job. And you know, because it can be overwhelming, some parents don't. But always remember that your voice is important, what you think is important, and you know what your child needs is important. Is it always going to be the absolute best that can be offered? It's a free, appropriate public education, the word being appropriate. But the goal is that, you know, your child is learning and your child is engaging. And to me, don't lose sight of that. Don't let somebody take away your voice. You know, you're the one who who needs to be heard. And if you can do it for you know for any reason, please be the one to do it because I think that will, you know, support your student best. You know, but don't lose faith, don't lose hope. 21 years is a long time, but you'll get there. Or even 18 years is a long time, but you'll get there. You'll get through. But that's really, you know, I thank you for letting me talk for about something that I love. So I appreciate that very, very much. So,
well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you coming on to share your information and your wealth of knowledge as an ESE teacher, as a professional, and then also on the personal level as a parent. So thank you so much for sharing the information. I appreciate you and thank you all for joining us. See you soon.